Welcome back to Movie Explained in English. Today I'm going to explain an action-adventure sci-fi film called Jumper. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care. David Rice is a teenager living a normal life in a small rural town. He talks to Millie, a classmate whom he's attracted to. David gives Millie a snow globe as a gift, and Millie accepts it wholeheartedly. Another classmate, Mark, intervenes and takes the gift away, teasing David. Their classmate then throws the snow globe into the middle of a frozen lake, and David attempts to retrieve it. Millie tries to discourage him, but David continues. He gets to the snow globe, but the ice gives way and he falls under. Millie runs to help, but David gets trapped beneath the ice. The current drags him farther down, and there's no chance he can get back to the surface. Suddenly, he finds himself in the middle of the public library. David is completely disoriented and in shock, but he tries to walk out of the library without arousing suspicion. David heads home and his father, William, notes that he's late. David lives alone with his father as his mother left when he was a child. William asks where David has been, but he doesn't answer. William gets angry and chases David into his room. David locks the door, but William tries to force himself in. Just as William bursts in, David disappears and reappears in the library again. David realizes that his newfound ability could be the key to a better life. He goes home and takes out some money he saved. He decides to move to a bigger city and start a new life. David then tries to learn more about his abilities by practicing at a park, seeing if he can gain better control of his powers. He looks through a tourist magazine and sees different tourist attractions all over the world, trying to teleport to those places. He sees the Empire State Building and remembers being there with his mother, Mary. Things in his room suddenly start flying around, and he teleports to the Empire State Building. David then realizes that he can only teleport to places he's been. With no money, David decides to use his powers to steal from a bank. He goes to a bank and asks to use the bathroom, and as he makes his way, he gets a glimpse of the interior of the bank's vault. That evening, he teleports into the vault and takes as much money as he can. He makes several trips, filling up his bag with each return. The following day, an investigation into the bank robbery begins. Roland Cox appears and tells the bank manager he works for the government. He then requests all video surveillance footage and the names of every person who has entered the bank in the past month. Roland notes that the bank vault had never been opened, and authorities have no idea how the robbery was performed. Roland appears to have knowledge of people who can teleport and theorizes that the theft could have been committed by one of them. Several years pass and David now lives in downtown New York in a penthouse apartment. He lives in excess, having everything he needs and doing whatever he wants. His apartment is filled with pictures of different locations around the world, and he even has a secret room where he keeps currencies from various countries. David then teleports to a bar in London, spotting a beautiful woman. He teleports to her without caution, and another person, Griffin, sees him teleporting. He spends the night with the girl, and the following day he heads out to Fiji to surf massive waves. After that, he goes to Egypt, having lunch on top of the Sphinx. In a tropical jungle, a man teleports trying to escape. He teleports through the wilderness, but a cable is attached to him, rendering him unable to leave. He gets stuck in a tree, tangled in electrified wires. Roland appears and walks up to him. The teleporter asks why Roland has done this to him, and Roland tells him that people who can teleport are abominations and must be exterminated. He then stabs the man, killing him. Roland then receives a phone call about the robbery that occurred several years back. David arrives back in New York at his apartment and discovers Roland is there. Roland tells David he's investigating a bank robbery, but he's not from the police. David asks Roland to leave, but Roland instead takes a baton and electrocutes David. David tries teleporting away, but struggles to get farther than a few meters. Roland runs up, electrocuting David again and throwing him off a ledge. Roland then shoots a cable, attaching his baton to David. Roland secures his baton to the floor, anchoring David and disabling him from teleporting too far. David desperately tries to escape, teleporting to a hidden room in the wall and managing to cut off the cable. He takes several bags of money and disappears. he reappears back in his father's house in his old room. William hears David arriving and rushes to him. William begs David to stay, telling him that he's been unsure if he's going crazy because of his son disappearing. David reassures William that he's not going crazy, but he disappears just as quickly. The next day, David looks for Millie and finds her working at a local bar. He then runs into his old school bully, Mark, and they get into a brawl. David ultimately ends up teleporting Mark into a bank vault and leaving him there. David returns to Millie, and the two catch up. David tells Millie that he's now in a banking profession and asks her how she's doing in the small town. Millie says she still dreams of travelling the world, and David offers her a trip to Rome with him. Millie is ecstatic to hear this and tells David she'd love to go with him. Behind them, Griffin is watching closely. A few hours later, David and Millie are in Rome, going to see the Colosseum. Meanwhile, Roland pretends to work for the CIA to get to Mark, who's at a police station. He asks Mark about what happened to him in the bank, and Roland learns of Millie and finds that she has just arrived in Rome. In Rome, David and Millie are in an apartment having a conversation about their lives and how they've both held out for the last couple of years. David and Millie then get romantic and share an intimate moment, kissing passionately. Later that day, David sneaks Millie into the Colosseum and they explore, avoiding guards. David then separates from Millie to open a locked door and finally runs into Griffin. Griffin reveals himself to be another person who can teleport, referring to himself and others like him as jumpers. He calls David out for his lavish and carefree lifestyle and tells him that a group of people called paladins is determined to kill all jumpers. Just as he explains, a pair of paladins appear. The paladins approach and take out their batons, and a fight breaks out. David tries to run, but gets snagged by one of the electrified cables, which disables his teleportation ability again. Griffin then fights the two paladins, quickly overpowering them. He disables both pursuers and tells David that he's been killing paladins for a long time. He then teleports away to his secret lair. David sees a residue called a jump scar from Griffin's jump and decides to follow. Griffin warns him off, but David returns to Millie. David now takes Millie away, leading her out of the Colosseum, but Millie demands an explanation for what is happening. Before David can start explaining, the police arrive and arrest him for breaking into the Colosseum. At the police station, David is questioned but maintains that he's only a tourist who violated the rules and is sorry for it. The officers then leave David, telling him to wait for the magistrate from the US Embassy. As David waits, a woman enters and he recognises her as Mary, his mother. Mary tells David he only has 30 seconds before more paladins arrive and hands him a key to his handcuffs. She hurries back out and David chases after her but loses her. He then meets back up with Millie and the two head for the airport. At the airport, David tells Millie that they have to separate. Millie is disappointed to hear this but proceeds with her flight alone. Meanwhile, Roland arrives at William's house and introduces himself as part of the IRS. He asks about David, but William is unwelcoming and uncooperative. William tells Roland that he hasn't seen David for 8 years. He also mentions how Mary left him and David when David turned 5. William asks Roland to leave, but Roland refuses. David arrives at Griffin's hideout and sees that Griffin's walls are full of pictures and information about paladins around the world. David asks Griffin for an explanation as to why paladins are killing jumpers, and Griffin explains that the war has been going on since the Dark Ages. According to Griffin, the paladins are religious fanatics who believe that the power to teleport should only lie with God. He then tells David that the paladins won't hesitate to kill anyone just to get to him. Realizing his father and Millie could be in trouble, David teleports to William and finds him unconscious on the floor. He teleports them to a hospital, and medical personnel rush to help William. David returns to Griffin's hideout, wanting to get more information on Roland as he intends to kill him. Griffin says it's useless, as he's been tracking Roland for more than 10 years, and with each encounter, Griffin only comes out with blood on his hands. He warns David that he shouldn't seek revenge, but David insists on going after Roland and teleports away. David goes back to New York, where he finds Millie, who is now back at the bar. He tells Millie that he can no longer keep her in danger and believes he must take care of Roland before he gets to her again. Millie, however, refuses to back down. She reminds David that they both have their own lives to live and that they've only gotten so close after years of silence. David realizes that he loves Millie and doesn't want to let her go again. He tells Millie he'll find a way to keep her safe. David returns to the bar to confront Roland. He finds Millie, who's preparing to leave for a flight. David takes her to a rooftop where they can escape, but as they're about to jump, Roland and the paladins arrive and capture Millie. They drag her away while David is left helpless. In a desperate attempt, David manages to teleport Millie to safety, but as soon as they land, Roland appears. In a fierce showdown, David fights off Roland and tries to save Millie. He uses all his powers and teleportation skills to battle the paladins. David ultimately manages to defeat Roland in a thrilling confrontation. With Roland defeated, David takes Millie to a safe place, and the two share a tender moment, realizing they can finally be together. In the film's finale, David and Millie teleport back to the frozen lake where it all began, and David finds a sense of closure with his past. With a renewed sense of hope and love, David and Millie hold hands, ready for their next adventure together. What did you think about Jumper? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this summary, don't forget to like and subscribe to Movie Explained in English for more exciting content.